We'll go with inspired of what you said about, we shouldn't canonize President Bush because he was a human, and, by not doing that, we stand to learn the most from him, especially with today being his 100th birthday. Obviously we are talking about his achievements and celebrating his legacy, but how does that sentiment of yours kind of play into all of this?
He was a man before he was a monument, and we honor both. We honor the man he was, we honor the monument that he's become. What we make of him tells us almost as much about ourselves as it does about him. And one of the remarkable things about George Bush is that the shadow has lengthened the farther we've gotten away from his presidency. And to some extent, it's kind of like a mountain. You can't really appreciate how tall it is until you're a little farther away.
Absolutely. And Jean, I was actually here covering the last book signing that you did, so I've heard the George Clooney story. Honestly, one of my favorites from the past couple days. And I love that, yesterday's event and today, it's a lot of laughter, it's a lot of love. And oftentimes when we're talking about our presidents, it's a lot of very serious, very somber. But, getting together, bringing together his administration and laughing and celebrating, what does that mean to kind of paint this more clear picture of who President Bush was outside of just what we typically see?
I'm going to quote a man named Hugh Sidey, who worked for Time magazine for years and covered, I think, every president from Truman through President Clinton, maybe. And he and President Bush were good friends. But he once said to me, he went to a reunion of Ronald Reagan staffers and then a reunion of President Bush's staffers very close together. And he said the difference is the Reagan people, it was all about a movement. The Reagan Revolution, the Reagan movement. He said the George Bush people, it was all about him. He was the world's best boss. And that's because he was funny, he was a lot of fun, he had a lot of great ideas, but he also wanted to help make the world a better place to live. So we love getting together and talking about him because it was fun to talk about him. I mean, fun to work with him, but you would go home at night. I mean, I was working 80-hour weeks sometimes working for him, but I would always feel really good about what I did that day because he wanted to change the world for the better. So we have a good time telling stories. And Bob Gates yesterday talked about what an incredible sense of humor he had.
Oh,
I think it's one of the reasons why he likes you so much.
Yeah.
It is, because other reasons, but you have a great sense of humor and he appreciated that.
Well, that's kind of you to say. It's the nicest thing you've ever, maybe the only nice thing you've ever said.
Oh my gosh, the Mother Teresa story from yesterday.
Was that not hysterical?
Sent me over the
Do you know
edge.
the Mother Teresa story? Is that not the funny? And Andy Card tells it so well. Let us pray.
Oh, it was so good. And for both of you, having this close relationship with President Bush, spending all of this time, documenting what he's doing, talking and working with people who are very close to him, going through diaries and all of these documents, and to a point that you made earlier during the discussion, what can we as just Americans take from President Bush and what he has left us here?
I'm going to let the historian answer that.
Democracy's worth the fight, and it is a fight. It is a struggle, constant struggle between our worst instincts and our better angels. And George H.W. Bush came out on the side of the angels and would want us to do the same.
Absolutely. And just kind of last question, then I'll pass it on over to Luke. I mean, what do you guys think he would say about just seeing all of this? I mean, we know he was not a man to direct this kind of attention onto himself, but surely, what do you guys think he would have thought of this?
About this week?
Yes, ma'am.
He would have a lot of fun because he loved people. He loved all these people. He's the biggest extrovert you ever met. He did not like to spend time alone. But at some point, he would pull both John and me aside and Andy Card and say, it's too much about me. We need to talk about other people. Well, sir, it is your birthday.
Exactly.
That's awesome. I'll go ahead and pass it on to Luke, but I'll keep my mic here just in case.
Thank you.
And so I'm curious, kind of in regards to y'all's books, what was the inspiration behind the writing of those? Jean, I know you touched on how you have a lot of stories that needed to be told and everything. So can you kind of touch on what led you to decide to go ahead and write the books?
Well, the first book, I wasn't sure I should write a book because I wasn't sure they were my stories to tell. But I knew that if I didn't tell them, who would? Nobody. And so I asked the kids what they thought of the idea, and they loved it. And it just would have been a shame to let stories like the George Clooney story die.
Right.
And there's so many more like that. The second book, Character Matters, was my editor's idea because he felt there were so many great life lessons in the man I knew. He said, let's write a book that's strictly about what we can learn from him. And that's when I reached out to his family and friends and said, send me, what do you think? And I think there's 157 separate essays in the book.
Oh, wow.
And there's a lot of great life lessons in that book.
And yourself, what was your inspiration behind writing this biography about 41?
Well, there are two, so which one do we?
Your most recent one.
So centennials give us a chance to assess not only the life of the subject, but also the life of the nation. And one of the things that is self-evident about President Bush is that though he governed 30 years ago, which is, I know you think that's a long time.
Right.
You all, that's your average ages put together. It's not that long ago. And I wanted to, I wanted to present the visual riches of the library and the family holdings, which I'm hugely grateful to the library for all that they've done. From a thematic perspective, if you look at George Bush, you see both how far we've come from a time when a president could embody decency and dignity and not be attacked for that. And it's a reminder of how much we need, to go to Jean's point, how much we need that character. Not just in the leaders, but in the led. Not just for the people on the ballot, but the people doing the voting.
In the planning and process of y'all's recent books, how long have they been in the works?
Well, my book came out in April. I finished it probably last Labor Day. And it took me a while to wrap my arms around that book. My deadline was Memorial Day of 2023. And I did not type chapter 1 until April Fool's Day. So I actually wrote the book in 2 months.
Did you see any karmic? You can't walk into things like that.
What do you mean?
April, never mind.
Okay, yeah, April. The minute I said April Fool's, I knew it was a big mistake to just say that in front of you. It's one of those books. And if you're a writer, you would know this. Sometimes you just wake up and start writing, and it's happened to me a couple times, and that's what happened with Character Matters. The Man I Knew, the first book I wrote during the pandemic, it saved my life. And that was fun. I took my time. But Character Matters I wrote in about 2 months. But keep in mind, everyone had sent me all these essays. I'm just the book's narrator, basically. So,
right. Mine was probably a year. And it's an unusual project for me because it was so heavily visual. And I had a great team of folks, including people here at the library, who were immensely helpful.
Awesome.